Hello, everyone. Welcome to Educational Norm. Today, I have a very special guest, a longtime friend. I've known her as Connie French in her life before this, but now it's Connie Steverding. And I said that right on the first try, so I'm very proud of myself. Connie is currently the Director of Growth and Development for Perry Local Schools, and that's Perry in Lake County, not Perry down by Maspin. They often get confused.
We
Uh,
do.
Welcome to the show, Connie.
Yes, thank you very much, Norm.
This is the first time we've actually talked in probably 30 years.
Isn't that crazy? And
It
we
is
picked up
crazy.
like we've been, friends forever. So that's
Yes,
awesome.
I think, and this is going to put a date on it. I think the last time I saw you might have been after prom when you left Cedar Point early because I couldn't find a friend to bring home.
Okay, gosh. Maybe. That's funny. Yes, that
Yes,
was, oh, how much fun is that? Thinking
yeah,
back to those times.
yes, that was fun. And little did we know that really didn't matter back or now, but back then it was a big deal.
Yes, yes.
So welcome. I do appreciate you coming on to Educational Norm. And since it's been 30 years, I just need to know what you've been doing leading up to
Sure,
now.
sure. Well, I luckily found my way into education thanks to Mrs. Freeze. Let's shout out Mrs. Freeze, our English
Woo.
teacher from high school. She saw something in me I didn't see yet, and she said, I think you'd be a great teacher. And I said, really? And so there was a special educational program through Ohio. They anticipated a teacher shortage in 1991. So they wanted some quality candidates to be in the field when this teacher shortage happened. So I signed up for it. I wrote an essay and I got it. So it paid for part of my school. And I was a little bit salty occasionally when I have to sign the promissory note each year because you did have to teach in Ohio for 5 years. Because what if I wanted to be like a cultural geographer or something, you know? But it wasn't until student teaching, I it fit like a glove, and it was something I was sort of natural at, and I feel like it's been a very fruitful career that I've been very passionate about. So I ended up teaching in Streetsboro for 10 years. I coached three sports. I was very, very busy then, and I ended up getting my master's through Ken at the time in curriculum instruction. Got my national board certification. What an opportunity that was, right?
Wow. Right.
$2,500 for 10 years. I mean, it was great.
That's
And it
amazing.
really makes you truly reflective of your teaching. So I really think that was a boost to where I wanted to go next. I decided to come closer to home, and I ended up getting a job at Perry, where I am at now. And I started teaching English at the high school, which I had done at Streetsboro as well. And then interestingly, our school had an opportunity to sort of transform to mastery learning, and the whole district had read Guskey's book and Tom Guskey, and they wanted some facilitation of that throughout the district. Financially, I think we were better off than we are now, but we were able to hire five. They called us mastery learning facilitators, and five of us teachers. There was one administrator who came back to that, like this instructional coach job. We ended up doing that together for that 1 year, and then we went down to three, and then we went down to one. So I did that for 14 years, and it's one of my favorite landing spots for me. It's instructional coaching, I think, is something that also came very naturally to me. I love getting into the trenches with the teachers and working alongside them, problem solving things that, aren't working. It's not an easy job, as we all know.
Right.
So I've really enjoyed that. And then administrators move and things like that. So my superintendent called me in the summer and said, "Hey, so how about dean of students at the elementary?" And I was still on teacher contract. And I said, "Elementary? I'm such a high school English teacher." I go, "Elementary?" So I, in fact, became the elementary dean of students, and it was really, really, really nice to be back with the kids. 5-year-olds, I didn't get right away, but I really, really enjoyed it. And so I did that for 5 years. And then my superintendent felt like it was a time to use some of my skill set, and created a position, that director of growth and development. And it really gave me an opportunity to get back into some of the coaching, professional development, all the new teacher training. anything curriculum, instruction, assessment comes my way. So I've been doing that for the last 3 years.
You've seen it all. You've been in all different levels, and I think that's a huge advantage when it comes to seeing the big picture when it comes to curriculum and instruction. You get to see the
All
little
levels and all
baby.
subjects, which is
Yes,
very interesting. Helping
yes.
PE teachers isn't quite the same as helping, English, which I'm very comfortable in. So yeah, it's definitely given me a wide span of things.
It's a great experience to have when you do work with other people and things that you aren't comfortable because you grow. It's just part of the learning process
Absolutely.
for you. So I'm very intrigued by your mastery learning, and our topic today really is standards-based grading and
Right.
mastery, and going into assessment. So with that mastery learning group that you had, what were your main responsibilities?
Our main responsibilities was to teach some of the tenets. We really wanted to be clear in what we were teaching. Um, we were really into the formative assessments. Back in the day, it was formative A and formative B, and that you would give kids an opportunity to practice some of the tenets that are still within our district and standards-based learning, but it was very much about, making the learning the focus instead of necessarily the timeline or pacing or scope and sequence. Um, it was a lot of heavy lifting, and we still could use some tuning up, at times. But I really think it laid the base strongly for a more thorough standards-based learning system that we now practice.
So with the standards base that you have now in place, what grade levels do you do standards-based grading in Perry?
So, I'm going to tell you, it's probably a little bit of a hybrid in some ways, but K through 6, we only give a symbol. We have not met yet, but we use NM, and then we have in progress, and then we have proficient, and then we have advanced. And that's K6. And actually, sixth grade, this is the first year they don't have grades. So it's been a phase. I mean, we've been at this for a long time, and fifth grade was last year and sixth grade was this year. So K4 has been no grades for a really long time. So
So
when
since
when the kids get the report card, what will be on there will be English or ELA, but it will have all of we call them power objectives, standards.
Mhm.
And we did a lot of work back post, Gusky. We were doing Ainsworth and, Reeves and things like that. And we tried to prioritize our curriculum. So we took a state guaranteed curriculum and we made power objectives out of those. So for ELA, say we have 9. And so for all 9 of those kindergartners, first graders will get assessed throughout the semester or throughout the year on all of those 9. Maybe not all first semester, but read for literary text will probably be assessed each of the 9 weeks. So they will get a PIPNM or advanced. We don't really do advanced K4 too much, but they'll get that each of the 4 9 weeks. 7 through 12 get the same thing on the report card, but they also get a letter grade.
Okay.
So we're
Well,
still using personages, but that's another story for another day. But it's so funny because I know we're going to be talking about the book, the fires within assessment grading and reform. They dropped a new podcast because when we had talked, I think they had 15, and the new podcast is exactly what I've been working on. And it's how clear are your proficiency scales?
mhm.
How clear is the steps that it takes to get to the learning? And I teach some classes to our teachers. We have a novice practitioner and a scholar class. And I was teaching the scholar teachers the other day, and I had read a really great book called Standards Based in the Classroom, Make Learning the Goal. And this is a lot to do with the state of Vermont. And they are really transitioning to more of the doing of the subject than the content statements. And so when we were trying to do proficiency rubrics, we call them proficiency rubrics in our district, it's very content based. And we became very much like, had one idea, had 2 ideas, had 3 ideas, or sometimes,
Yeah.
adequately all the time. And it really was missing the whole point
Mhm.
of giving the kids the steps to the learning. And so the scales, they call them scales at this Champaign Valley school district in Vermont, it's more about cause and effect for social studies than it is timelines. And so they would use cause and effect not only in social studies, but they would also be working on that in English or in their science classes. And so it would all be working up into these graduation requirements, like our portrait of a graduate or whatever you might
Mhm.
have. That is sinking into me. And so I'm really curious as to where this is all going to go eventually. And there's a really good a Facebook page that Ken O'Connor, the guru up in Canada, he runs. And there was a post about a week ago, and I actually asked all these questions. Anybody out there, help. If you want to call it success criteria, anchor scores, scales, whatever it is, let me see what you're doing. Let me pick your brain because we've been at this for a while.
It really is it's an ongoing process. It's
Hmm.
never ending, even though you've been at it for decades, it sounds like.
Yeah.
There's still things that can be tweaked and made better just for the betterment of the students and what they're getting. I didn't realize that you were behind the power standards that you have because I've been using those as an
Oh,
example across, some of my
oh,
PD.
wow. Good,
So,
good,
I mean, even before I was doing this current job, in my Twinsburg job, I was pulling those up to look at them and to show as an example.
good,
Um,
good. It really does start there at times, that deconstruction, and then we put those supporting indicators underneath. It's all the state, it's the
mhm,
content statements, but how you organize it and how you unpack that is so important.
mhm.
And even a veteran teacher could probably tune up on that. And how it aligns to the state test or the AP test, whatever it is that you're teaching. I really feel like that is so, so valuable,
Well, I know
especially for
that,
assessment.
right. I know one of the movements is to try to get away, not away, but to move into the competencies of for a student rather than the standard to make sure that they're learning the skill that goes along with
Sort of
these
like our
things.
doing that we just talked about.
Correct.
Yes.
And so I've seen that in many of the books that I've been reading lately about the move to competency-based education, which I love. It fits in well with a lot of CTE programs and things that have been time tested and proven. And
Good.
so I think that, again, it's ever evolving. And I'm sure that, if we had this discussion in 5 years, it's going to be even more different than what it is now. So it's really a great, it's a great topic to talk about because it's something that will be continuously on our plates as
And
an
there is a
educator.
marriage of both. And, it's not like content takes a back seat because content is so important. And, I'm reading right now The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler. We can't rid ourselves of context or I'm sorry, of knowledge because kids won't be able to read complex text. I mean, it has such a value in there. And it was really, I was at where was I yesterday? Ooh, I was at the ESC in Western Reserve, and we were talking about the reading test and how maybe invalid it might be for the state of Ohio because kids are giving cold reads on things. And are we really testing reading comprehension at that point because they don't have the access to it? And states like Louisiana are doing pilots to actually have a guaranteed, I think they call it the guided curriculum. I haven't read too much into it, but these are the topics that will be tested and they already know ahead of time. So they're going to teach those and use all the other things they've been doing. But now we have a test that's actually testing reading comprehension and not just, the rich get richer and the ones that
Mhm.
never get to the museums and things like that get poorer. So
Right.
um, it's interesting how it all webs together.
Yes. I put it under the umbrella of what good teaching is, and it starts with that big picture understanding, and then it gets down to the nitty-gritty of how you handle things on a daily basis. So
Yeah,
it really does come all together in one nice package, but the package just changes shapes all the time. It's hard to get a
correct.
grasp on it. So let's talk about standards-based grading a little bit more in depth, and
Sure.
let's gear it towards your journey with not only the district itself, but the parents and how the teachers received it, because it's one of those where I've been in schools where it's been implemented, it's in the process, and I hear the same things. And the book that you recommended, which we will get to, it's like I wish I would have had the book to help me at least formulate some ideas of how I could have addressed those better than what I did.
Sure.
So let's start with, what is the standards-based grading that you've put into place and how was the rollout? How was it received, by parents and teachers both, and how's it going?
Sure. We put together a committee, of
Schools are good
teachers,
at that.
administrators, right, parents, students, and we all really just committed to learning. And I don't have exactly how long we did that because it seems like it's sort of mushing together because we've been at it for so long. But we really talked to other school districts. I remember North Canton being a big district that we mirrored a lot of our stuff out of. We had a Nebraska school that we were in constant contact with. But it was pretty cutting edge back then. I don't know if cutting edge is the right word, but there wasn't a lot of schools that were out there. And it's so refreshing now to have such a national conversation because now I can ask good questions of many people. Like you said, like I wish there would have been a book out there like that.
Hmm.
So we studied, and then we committed to like 9 guidelines, taking the broken fixes from O'Connor, looking at those. And actually, we went to O'Connor. He actually worked with us and Bay Village. He came in, Warmley's been in. We just really tried to get really good at some of those things, like reassessment, like the zero, and things like that. I think Gusky came to a seminar in Painesville, and we all got together. So we just really good learning. And then we had tons of like parent coffees or, parent Q&As. Um, our parents are very trusting of us, so I give kudos to our community. But we did have to talk through, and there's still conversations. Oh, reassessment's making my kid lazy, So it's not like it's without full clarity, but we really try to be transparent exactly why, what we were attempting to do to be consistent, meaningful, valid, um, so on and so forth. So that's sort of our trajectory of where we started and where we went. We didn't try to do it all at one time. I think when we first started, we went 80-20. I think, we could sort of grab onto that. We're 90-10 now, 90% summatives, 10% formatives. That seems to have been a good landing spot for us. Some gurus out there would say absolutely not. You should be 100-0, but it seemed like it was a good place for us to land. Um, so we did that for a while, and then, the next year we would try something new. Okay, so let's look at power law. Let's look at, decaying average. Let's look at averages in total. Is that helping or not helping? So every year we would try to tackle more and more. Um, we have 3 guidelines that sort of direct where we go with our grading and reporting. I don't have those committed to memory. They focus on all 3 aspects. It explains how we deem learning and what we have as beliefs. And then it goes to what is proficient, what is in progress, what is not met. For instance, some growth areas advanced column. What is advanced, and so 7th through 12th right now 100% is advanced, so is that really advanced, so what is that, what we're trying to get towards? So that's something I think we could grow on. um and then how do we get the kids involved? How do we have student ownership? We were a big FIP school when Ohio did FIP, formative
Hmm.
instructional practices. So a lot of FIP stuff's in there, We got to guarantee that kids have ownership. FIP 5. How is your assessments aligned? FIP 3. So you'll see a lot of that in there. And I think the last time we did any revision to our grading and reporting practices was 2019.
Okay.
Committed anything to paper.
Well, I think since then it's been recovering from COVID steps, and
Sure.
there's been a lot of things on the plate since then. So, I mean, just the mere fact that you have it rolled out, and what grades are using that right now? Did you say K through
K-12.
6? Oh,
K-12, K-6 is no grades. 7 through 12 still has the tenets of standards based. They just they still give a letter grade.
and
In
are they the
addition
ones doing the
to,
90-10?
they are. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's
And like kindergarten, they would giggle at 90-10. Like, what do you mean? Like, hey, it's
right,
it's it's practice until it's not. They are able to collect evidence all throughout the 9 weeks. So it's not quite the same conversation, but
right, right. So with that being implemented at the high school at that level, how are the students reacting to that 90% as that summative assessment? Are they handling that fairly well, or was that a learning curve for them as well?
I think it was a learning curve, especially for those kids that maybe, we hear this a lot. My kid's not a good test taker.
Hmm.
What we try to promote in our district is we want kids to show their learning, and we really want it to be learning. We want that to be the focus. We want, instead of, well, I taught it, they didn't learn it kind of thing. We want the learning to be the focus. So it doesn't get disguised by the kid that's compliant, which is really great, and the kid that does homework and, shows effort and all those things. There's a place for that. It's just not within the grade.
Right.
That's a whole nother story, a whole
R-
nother separate conversation, but
Yeah, that's another episode. So
okay.
we'll
Yeah.
hold on to that one.
Right, right,
Uh,
right.
um, do you have, and the reason I'm asking this is I've seen this done for elementary schools in the Diocese of Cleveland because they are all standards-based K4, I think, or K5.
Okay.
They actually put in proficiency guides so the teachers could say this is what the student can do, so they should have this score. Do you have anything like that at Perry, or do
So
you leave
more
that to
so at
teachers?
our elementary, they
Okay.
have learning progressions.
Yes.
So what they'll have for that 9 weeks is this is what this will look like at the end of the 9 weeks. And sometimes they'll have an exemplar, or in math, it will actually have like they'll actually write in what that number bond would look like or whatever it is that they're
Hmm.
working on. So I feel like we're pretty good at that at the elementary level. Um, I think the kids know more so than maybe the parents at the middle and high school. But I think it's always something you can improve on. Clarity is half the battle, right? And what's
Right.
the effect size? I mean, it's huge. I think it's like point
0.75.
0.7. Yeah, exactly. Good job. And some people would say it's even 0.85. So,
Hmm.
you could get your year's worth of growth and even more.
Right.
So if sometimes we are very in tune with what we're teaching and maybe our team is, but sometimes I think our students are left out of that equation.
Without a doubt. And I think one of the selling points that make the teachers that I've worked with understand it a little bit better is when I say, well, what is the evidence that you have that they learned? And they will say a test. I go, well, what part? And they go, it's
Yeah.
you're not being very specific on a traditional test unless you are lined up with the standards, unless there's a direct purpose of doing this the right way. So it really is, I think it's a great thing for teachers to be able to provide feedback rather than just a grade. And that's where the teachers can start, building their students to that learning progression.
Oh, feedback is, I mean, that's the crux. I mean, that could really make or break anything, right?
Hmm.
And so, we have a reassessment policy in our district and it gets beat up sometimes, kids aren't studying for the first test and things like that, but there are plenty of kids that didn't learn it the first time, and it's no fault of anyone. They didn't get what you taught, or
Hmm.
something wasn't, sticking. So when they go through, and we have some, different policies that kids have to do things before they do the reassessment. Shouldn't that all be part of that instructional cycle? It's not an add-on. It's not something that we're gifting the kids. It's what is intended for learning.
Right.
And so that's hard to digest sometimes. And it's a lot on the teacher after they graded the first one, and they're
Hmm.
grading something else. But you had brought up a point about where's the collection of evidence. And sometimes I feel like we do it all in one bucket.
Hmm.
And, we would promote that you would have an assessment that's aligned to each of the learning targets or whatever, however you do them. And that kid's only assessing on the part he doesn't understand. Now, there's nothing wrong with spiraling. There's nothing wrong with reassessing over time, but let's make our lives easier and let's get to what you're actually trying to collect evidence on. One of my favorite quotes is from Wiggins and McTighe, and they say, how is the student guilty of understanding? Where's the preponderance of evidence? I think I even put it in my little questioning that you had provided. Yeah, I love that because prove it to me. How
Right.
do you know that that they know or understand or whatever it is that you wanted them to attain?
Well, I think you gave me a great reminder when we were on the phone, initially setting this up, that every test could be summative. And if
Right.
you're doing the retake, if you're allowing the reassessment, then it is because we've now learned what they are not getting, and we are doing steps to make sure they get it, so we can then have them reassess and see if they've picked it up. So I
Yeah,
love that idea that even though we call them summative, if you're truly bought into this understanding of standards-based grading, nothing's summative. It's just an ongoing learning process, which I thought was a good reminder because it's one of those that
sure,
you
sure.
forget about thinking that way,
It's how you
especially
use
if
it,
you are
right?
not ingrained in this.
I'm in a data leaders PLC with an ESC, and the author of it, I think I put it in the notes, but Paul Bambrick Santoyo isn't about whether we taught it, it's about whether students learned it. And I
Right.
know that sounds very simplistic, but I think that's something that really should be at the core of assessment.
Hmm.
And, Wiggins and Time, I'm going to shout out them again, but they have a great chapter in their book called Thinking Like an Assessor, and they can't say it enough. And so, you know, what is that collection of evidence? But you got to make sure they learned it.
Right.
And that's where our jobs are hard. It's hard to make good assessments. It's hard to know what to assess and how it's aligned. And did you have enough, a sampling size that would match your instruction? And I don't know. I think they're guilty of understanding, kind of thing. So it's difficult.
Well, I use that same idea of, well, I covered it as a teacher. That doesn't
Right.
mean you taught it, and that doesn't mean they learned it. So
Right.
covering is a very weak term when we start talking
It
about
is. We
what
try
you're
to use the
doing for
word
your.
uncoverage. Yes.
Yes. It's one of my, I won't say a pet peeve, but it's just something I hear and I'm going, oh, do you touch on it? Do you cover it deeply? What is coverage?
Sure, sure. And there's
It's
always
pretty.
good intentions there, but yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult.
As as we're talking and as I was reading the book, I was thinking that there were a lot of things that taken as an individual issue is can be a very big issue in that regard. But when you take the entirety of standards-based grading and you put it all together, reassessments are necessary to be good at standards-based grading. And if that's something that is needed in the bigger picture, then we have to look at the bigger picture constantly to make it work. And I
Yeah,
think that that's going to help me in the future to understand that, yes, these small things can be big deals, but they're small. When you look at this bigger picture, you can allow retakes if you're doing standards-based grading, not so much if you're doing, the traditional piece, because, oh my gosh, how many times do I have to give this test? You know,
right, right.
but
And
and
sometimes you got to move on.
yeah, sometimes
Sometimes
you
you've got to
do.
call it a day.
But there's
You
still
know,
ways of doing it where you can reteach and spiral and still have that part of your test and have questions from day one on the last test just because you want to make sure that it's fresh in their mind or whatever you want to
sure.
do.
And
So
I
it's
do think, oh, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I
It's
think
your show,
sometimes we
sister.
do make it hard on ourselves because we feel like it's a gift to the student to be a reassess. So I'm going to make it, very strenuous and lots of hoops to jump through. And gosh darn it, they're going to earn this. But really, our intent, our outcome should be that they learned it.
Right.
And so if a student messes up on a question, and we got to be careful on our assessments too, because point values and averages and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's definitely another episode.
Yes,
But if a kid, as soon as he was able to look at it, corrects it, or whatever, and can come up to you and orally communicate with you, and you're convinced there's no need to go anywhere further, it's reassessed.
without
And
a
so I
doubt.
don't know if we always have to do this elaborate reassessment. Um, your outcome is that you want them to know that they learned it and they understand it. And so if you have proof for that, move on.
Right. Exactly. We are very poor at recording observational data where
Yes.
they come up and they have a conversation with you and we just say, well, now do that on the test. Why do they have to do it again?
It doesn't have to be after
They
school
just
or
told
before.
you.
Yeah, we're done. Move
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
exactly.
And for the
Um,
kids' sake, you're valuing what they're doing too. You're valuing that they actually can prove it to you. And that's the whole point. So,
well, and I think a part of me, because I was always teaching in a fully inclusive classroom, that sometimes those kids with writing issues and spelling issues and just getting thoughts down on paper, they struggle with that kind of assessment. But when you talk to them, like, man, this kid gets it. So
yeah.
why would I force him to do that? Because he's proven to me that he knows it.
Yeah.
It's
And so
something
what
that you have to take advantage of.
And I know we moved on to assessment a little bit, but like one of the frustrating things about assessment, this is from a parent's perspective as well. I have two high schoolers, is sometimes when they do the assessment and they get it back, and I say, okay, so you got XYZ, percentage. What did you not understand? I have no idea.
Right.
And maybe the teacher's giving feedback and they're not listening, and
Right.
they're not getting it. But like, what's the whole point, back to your summative thing? What's the whole point of it all then?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I just feel like we do ourselves a real disservice on not leveraging assessments more,
Hmm.
in a way that's just as much about the teaching cycle as the learning targets on the board, which they don't
Right.
have to be on the board, by the way, either. You know, that
Well,
doesn't make a good teacher, right?
so I go back to, and I'm sure you're well aware, I wasn't a great student. I was in school to be social. That's really all that mattered to me. And I was told if I had a C, I was fine. So as soon as I saw a C, I didn't look over the test. Oh, I got a C, I'm good. And so I never went back through the test to find out what I was lacking. And the teachers at that point really didn't have that in their vocabulary either. So it
Sure,
was like,
sure,
let's just grade them and move on. So, but if I was given something where it was just full of comments and they said, improve this, this, and this, I would do that. And then I knew what I had to do. And that's how I see standards-based grading in some regard, because
sure,
you're not putting that A or B on there. You're simply giving them feedback to improve, and you're training them how to use that feedback to improve themselves.
sure,
So
absolutely.
I think
And we
that's
got to
a
make sure, because I was an English teacher for 12 years, and I would put lots of comments in their papers and they wouldn't use them. So you got to make sure that it's fruitful in a way for them to drive the next step. You know what I mean?
mhm,
I used to say, and I was faulty at the time, like, I'm not going to look at your rough draft if you're not going to use my feedback. But what was I giving them as value to that feedback?
right.
I was doing more work than they were.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have it right. And so I feel like we do need to make sure that the feedback is, descriptive. It's very clear, it's actionable, it's timely, all those good words that we all know. You know, we got to make sure we're doing that better than just, like you said, not the grade at the top, or points, because, we still do a little bit of the point thing. We got to understand what they need to do next.
Well, so one of the groups that I've worked with in the past, and I've actually done two of these with them, is Collins Writing Out from the East Coast. They're based in New Jersey now, but they have what they call an FCA, which is a focus correction area, and they only have three. So that's what is being graded on at that time, and that's all we focus on. And English teachers hate it because they want to see the bigger picture, where
Yeah,
somebody like me in social studies, I'm only looking for three things. Perfect. I can do that.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's really geared for writing across
for
the
the
curriculum
kids.
to help people like me be consistent in their writing
Good.
expectations,
Yeah, that was we did that at Streetsboro 1993. Like, we had the focus correction areas in the left side, and so
mhm,
there is some wisdom to that.
without a doubt.
And many times you got to call it out, like, this is what I'm going to be looking for.
Hmm.
And then this is more of a holistic. This is more, and the kids will understand that as you
Without a
go
doubt.
through. Hmm.
They pick up a lot more, I think, just because they don't know any different. If they don't know any different, it's just, oh, this is what we do.
Yeah, right.
It really is easy.
Our kids are very compliant. They want to do, and they want to do well. I'm talking about kids in general, you
Yes.
know.
Yeah,
So,
no kid goes to school saying, I can't wait to fail today. I mean, it
right,
doesn't happen.
right.
Well, maybe I might know a few, but I mean, it's very,
Yeah.
very rare.
My
Very rare.
seniors even like stickers. I used to give stickers out to my seniors, and they're like, "What?" And I go, "They keep them on their notebook and compare. Like,
Yes,
they want to feel special. They want to be loved, you know?"
exactly. So one more statement on the assessment piece. I have found ChatGTP or AI as a great piece to be able to modify an assessment that I've created and just say, I want my students to do a retake on this test. Can you not just mix it up, but give me different questions that go along the same levels, the same numbers, so we have the same amount of points? Or could you focus on just this one area because that's where they're in need? And it will spit something out, and sometimes I can say this is good. Other times I have to, modify it a little bit more, but that made my life so much easier rather than having to recreate a whole new test just for a retake. And
Sure, sure.
it saves so much time.
Yeah, I can't imagine AI. I mean, I didn't even have email when I was teaching back in the day,
Yep.
email or internet or any of the above. So we used to get the pink slips in our mailbox, if someone
Yes.
called, which there's some nice to that too, so you're not always distracted. But we actually use Magic School,
Hmm.
and it's really helped. I don't use it extensively because I'm not currently in the classroom, but I have used it to help teachers teach, and not only for testing, but rubrics and other things as well. And I think, why not use those tools, right?
Exactly.
And you're always the discerner. You're always the one that says, yes, that's not aligned, that is aligned. But yeah, I would definitely bank on using it to make our lives easier so we can get to the job of teaching our
Right.
students and helping them.
I like the fact I can rearrange the test and have new questions. I caution them, don't let it grade your test, which some were trying to do. This is where you get to know your kids. If you're grading the test, you can really help discern what's the next step for that child.
Yeah.
And you can't rely on AI for that. If you
And
do, it's not going to be
sometimes
good.
kids get frustrated. I guess maybe I'm going a different way, but
That's fine. We'll
taking
go
their
wherever we
test,
want.
taking the test online, like through a Google Forms, sometimes the kid's like, oh, I hate when he tests online. I'd rather do my paper and pencil. I can read it better. So there's some wisdom there, and that was totally a sidebar. But we actually, as a third grade, changed our. We didn't go to the online testing. We did paper and pencil this year
Oh, wow.
for our third grade. Yeah, we just
Good.
felt there was real value in them actually writing out their essay, at the end. And I was at my workshop today. I was talking to you about earlier about middle school and tons of research about, pen to paper. So
Mhm.
there's some wisdom there too. So,
Right. Well, I want to make sure we have enough time to cover everything. And one of the things that we were going to talk about is suggestions if you want to move into standards-based grading, but you still are required to do that letter grade. I've done that at the college level, and I've shown people how to do that at high school and middle school level, because that's usually where the biggest, well, we need a letter grade because it goes on transcripts, this and that,
right, right,
whatever.
right.
Even though I don't agree with it, we can come up with a different way. There's still that need for many schools and teachers to have a letter grade. So, what are some suggestions you have to do standards-based philosophy and approach and still have the letter grade as part of the report card?
So that's part of the equation, but I don't think that's really the important parts. I think the importance parts is that all students learn and it might not be at the time frame you have it at. I feel like we need to get the non-academic factors out of the grade because it muddies the waters. And so you might, as a school district, have attendance be part of the grade. I don't know who does, but I don't know what would be a non-academic grade that would be in there, but effort or whatever it might be, you need to rid that grade of that and then talk as a district about how you can report those. Because that's a huge issue. And there's, the book that we'll be talking about, it has several different chapters on the non-academic factors because we do want to feel or we do want to be able to report on how kids are doing their durable skills. Our businesses want us to report on that, colleges, whatever it might be. So the process of how they get to the learning would be what we report separately. And some schools nationally, which I love that the conversation is current, is they're actually saying they're so darn important that we're creating a merit system. And
Hmm.
that merit system is valued as much as the academic side. So therefore, you have to be eligible to participate in extracurricular activities, not only academically, but through this merit system of these durable skills, whatever you guys, whatever,
Hmm.
your portrait has or whatever.
Right.
And I don't think that will fly at every district, but what a cool conversation, right? You want to talk about accountability. Let's make them accountable, right?
Well, that is something that I had brought up several times with teachers when they are pushing back a little bit on what the grade reflects. Wouldn't it be even more powerful to have a whole separate thing where they don't follow directions or they don't do homework as part of their own separate thing versus hidden inside of a grade that they don't even really know what it means?
Sure, sure.
And when you put that spotlight on that behavior, then it's a good conversation starter. It's what we have to do.
And it's as much as a report to the public of what those kids are doing, but it's as much of what are we going to do to teach that?
Exactly.
And some of those, and we were talking about executive functioning, before we start, and sometimes it's they should know it, but really they don't. And so let's take the opportunity to teach them how to take notes, how to be organized, time management. And boy, if we had a unified school approach to that, our kids would be on fire and talk about being prepared for college.
Hmm.
So yeah, you don't do your homework in college, you get a zero or whatever, but let's prepare them for college in a positive way so that they are going to just, blast it, when they
Right.
get to college. They're going to be ready.
I
Oh,
wanted to
gotcha.
address something about the non-academic parts that are on the test. And I'll give an example of a bonus question that will impact a grade, but now it's like, oh, they got an A because of that rather than a B because you made it worth so many points. So that's something that would be a non-academic area on
Right.
the
Or
test.
we used to give points like back in the day when we had interims and the parent would sign the interim and you would give points for that. Or the Kleenex boxes. I think that's a typical one that's brought up. Yeah, we've rated our grading and reporting of that. It's about chemistry.
Right.
It's about modern world history or whatever it is. Um, that's I would say an easy fix, but for some it might not be. But that cleans it up. It gives our stakeholders more confidence and in what we're trying to deliver, right? It's
Hmm.
more meaningful, it's more accurate, it's more valid. And that's really where the crux of standards-based learning is.
Well,
Um,
I
and
also
reporting.
I also say to teachers that every point has a purpose and every purpose has a point. So if you're asking for three things in this essay, then you should have something that's a 3 point, 6 point, 9 point, because then it makes sense that that's what we're looking for. Whereas if you say, oh, this whole thing's worth 5 points because it's a short answer essay, but you're only looking for three things, how does that work out in your points? All of a sudden you have to do all this math in your head to make it work, and it's not right.
Yeah, yeah. Talking about points is always a fun topic. But
Yes.
when you're grading by standard or you're reporting by standard,
Right.
those summatives matter.
Hmm.
And so, like what you're saying, if you have a summative for a power objective and you only have 10 points for that, and the kid gets a 7 out of 10, that summative now is directing that power objective to be a 70%, which is then averaged into your final grade. So it can get a little bit crazy there. You got to make sure that sampling size, that preponderance of evidence, is suitable enough for that power objective. Now, with that being said, and we've sort of sidetracked because this
We
is like a
did.
little bit more logistical for standards based, is that you might not have to weight that power objective as equally as the other power objectives. So you can always have that flexibility, at least with our
Hmm.
reporting system. So that's a workaround. Um, and then feedback, or actually feedback, that's, such a strong tenet of standards-based learning, but then practices penalty-free practices so that
Hmm.
kids can have an opportunity to dress rehearsal, to, try it and not get it and get help. And that's just part of your everyday, happenings. That's a great way to start it, get your toes in the water of standards-based learning.
Right. So I think all those are great suggestions, and there's always that something else we talked about before we jumped onto this call was where to start. And you've addressed a lot of that because a lot of it you just have to at some point trust that you're doing what's best for kids, making sure that they're going to get the most out of this situation. And if you are dipping your toe in, you might as well just go at that point and learn from your mistakes because every school is going to have different little nuances that they're going to have to do, but you don't know until you start trying. I mean,
Sure,
you can
sure.
do all this in theory, but as soon as it hits the carpet, you're like, okay, now really we have to change this, and this. So you have to get into it to really understand it. We were going to talk about assessment, but we already did that to some extent. Um, I want to get into the book because I've been trying not to talk about it. And it's really hard after you've read it and we're having this discussion. So the book that we're going to talk about a little bit is the Extinguishing the Fires Within Assessment and Grading Reform. It's by Garth Larson, Becky Pepler, Don Smith, and Matt Townsley. I'll put it up on the screen so everybody can see it. And it was forwarded by Rick Wormley. So it's a lot of really good people that understand standards-based grading, work with it on a daily basis. Um, I actually went out on LinkedIn and got them all as connections right after I read the book and thanked them for the work that they put into this. Um, and I want to thank you for turning me on to the book. It's super easy read. I mean, it
Yep.
really is laid out
Very
nicely,
practical.
very practical. And
Yeah,
like I said, I wish I would have had this years ago when I was doing some of these discussions. But tell us a little bit about this book from your perspective, how
sure.
you found out about it, and how you used this in your own work.
Sure. I was looking for, like we've talked about this standards-based learning, whatever, competency-based learning, target-based learning, whatever it is, has definitely erupted nationally, which is so cool, right? And so I was looking at current reflection on accountability, especially in the secondary schools. And so I happened across their, is it First Resources?
Yes.
Their organization, yes.
Yes.
And I've been familiar with Matt Townsley for a while, and that Facebook group that Ken O'Connor manages. Matt's probably one of the most frequently you know, he's on there a lot. And if you want to go to any kind of research, I think he's out of the University of Iowa. So when I saw his name, I'm like, okay, he's credible. And then I watched some of their podcasts first. And they have a podcast that's associated with it that they deal with many of the topics that are in the book. They drop one every month, and they're great. And some of the gurus have been on there, like Wormley has been on there, Ken O'Connor's been on there. But it's also the four of these individuals. Usually it's Garth, Becky, and Don who are in the schools currently, helping schools transform into these standards-based learning schools. So when I saw the podcast, I'm like, they're speaking my language.
Yes, they are.
And I loved everything that they were saying because it's sort of where we've been, but there are still some issues and there's still things that we're trying to wrestle with. So we bought the book and a couple of us read it and we actually attended one of their webinars too. And I feel like we're able to take out pieces and nuggets that are applicable to us.
Hmm.
Um, you know, almost the language to respond that we've had, but it's fresh.
Right, right, exactly.
It's nice to hear the struggles of others, no offense, but not to commiserate, but to lift each other, like,
Hmm.
oh, they're struggling with that too. And some of the struggles in here we did not struggle with, but then other people who read it would be like, that's exactly us.
Right, right. Well, they mentioned the four pillars of getting into this.
Yes.
And I'm gonna, I mean, we've talked about a lot of them already. That's why I feel we had to get to the book. But the first one is formative assessment should not count towards the grade. And you made reference to you use the 90-10. They
Hmm.
recommend 100 to 0.
Yep.
But it's a process that has to be comfortable for the community. I think that's the
Sure.
biggest pushback.
I heard that too, loud and clear in here. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's
Eh,
okay.
Well, if parents don't understand, we assume that they're reading what we put out. They're not reading what we put out. People don't read anymore. So what other ways
You
can we
need a
get it?
quick
It's not
sound
until
bite. Yeah.
right. It's not until it impacts them directly do they really pay attention. So that formative piece, you're at 90-10. Do you see potentially down the road you could be at the 100-0?
Sure, we've been at this for a while. It might stick here, but I can't predict that. But we do have some teachers that are 110, 110, 100.
There's some good math there. I see you're not
Yes,
the math
sorry.
person you said
Yes,
earlier.
yes, yes.
All right, so that's one piece, and then the second pillar was you need to have retakes. You need to be allowed the reassessment piece, which if you're doing 100% summative assessments, if you don't do retakes, you're in deep trouble. So I think that was my point earlier. You have to take the whole package to see how they work together. It's not just
Not
a
separate.
right. You
Right.
can't take each issue separately because they're not. They
Yeah.
intertwine. So with the retakes, that to me, one of the things they always talk about is, well, it's going to make our kids lazy. And you said you have actually referenced that earlier.
Sure,
What is,
sure.
tell us what the answer is to that because
Read the
they
chat.
did
No,
talk
I'm
about it in
kidding.
the book, and it is
Well,
something that comes up a lot.
it does. It does. And I really feel like it has to be part of the culture, right? And if we're really focusing on learning being the judgment of our teaching, if they didn't learn it, how can we not reassess? We want that information. And what I think is sometimes hard is when you're teaching very heavily content courses, you have that power objective and you're done with it and you're moving on, whatever it might be, you need to get on to the next subject matter, right? And so to reassess that, you're lingering there or things like that. So I can tell that that can be frustrating. But again, I would keep the North Star being the learning and not necessarily the teaching.
Mhm.
And maybe we don't get to all the subjects in that course, especially if it's not a tested course. Maybe we give ourselves grace sometimes but let's make sure they're learning what we're teaching. And I think that's so important. And I think in that reassessment pillar, it definitely says without penalty.
Hmm.
Because I think what sometimes I feel like teachers feel like they need to, well, the one kid took it and he got an A the first time. I don't think it's fair. And Wormley has a great book, Fair Isn't Always Equal. And, wrestle with that as a district, as a staff, as a team. What does that really mean? Does he know chemistry? That's what you have to keep coming back to. It doesn't matter how many times or, how many efforts he gave. Does he know that power objective?
Right.
So I think that's one of the most important things. But there will be parents that will say, I don't agree. You're not setting them up for success in college. They don't get reassessments then. But a lot of people will say, yeah, they can get a reassessment in college. It might be taking the class again and paying for it, but that might be the reassessment, if they don't try the first time.
Right.
But it's hard. You're pretty hard pressed. I mean, there's a lot of reassessment out there in the real world, if you want to
Hmm.
call it the real world, driver's exams, bar exams, whatever it is.
Teaching
But
certificates.
right, teachers, I think they even use that as an example in the book.
Yes, they
But
did.
I definitely think it's a little bit of a shift of thinking, but I definitely think it's if you keep learning at the core of what you're talking about, I think it's definitely an easy fix to how kids can learn because some kids are not going to learn the first time around.
No. And another issue that comes up in that same regard is, well, I have to teach it again if they're going to get better. So when do I do that when I need to move on? And that's where we start getting into different strategies of teaching, of blended learning models and small group instruction and doing things at different rates for different kids. There are definitely ways of doing it, but again, it will be a shift in mindset of how that
Yeah,
classroom
and
would operate.
sometimes it might be the kid's responsibility to stay after school.
Hmm.
And not all
Exactly.
kids can stay after school, so I understand there might be another time, but maybe it's on the responsibility of the kid. If
Right.
it's that important for him to learn, and what a great life skill you're teaching that kid. First of all, you're teaching him to advocate for himself, right? And I'm
Right.
talking more of the upper grades than the lower grades. And you're teaching him how to advocate for self. And by the way, elementary does this like inherently in their teaching.
Right.
It's a no-brainer. Like, I got to know how he's going to do. How am I going to know? How am I going to report if I don't reassess him? It's just like,
Right.
it's just a natural thing,
Right.
but I understand the content. In Gusky, gosh, I went back, we did, failure is not an option way back. I don't even know. I'm probably in the, late 2000s. And he said, sometimes you do got to move on. So
Hmm.
sometimes you got to give yourself grace and maybe, you give them the kid so many and it's time to move on. And that's where he is in chemistry. And it's
Right.
okay. It's
Right.
okay.
Not everybody's a chemist,
Yeah,
so
right, right.
that's something. And I'll have to tell you, the fair is not always equal was my textbook at college for those kids. The
Yeah.
the third one is getting the non-academic factors, which we
Yes,
already
which
talked
we
about.
talked
See,
about.
it was really hard not to talk about this book.
Right.
And the last one was make sure we're
Yeah.
measuring on targets, not just grading points, so having the learning targets out there, and that's what we're making sure that we focus on for those kids.
Right. Right.
Again, everything you've talked about, uh, if those are your pillars, I think you're going to find success. How did you gain your staff, the staff's idea of how this is going to work, and how did you get them to buy into standards-based grading? Uh, Obviously, there's literature, there's research, but we know teachers are creatures of habit. And for a lot of people, this is breaking a huge, huge trend of how they taught for years and years. How did you go about working with your staff to get everybody to buy into this type of
And I think
grade?
I alluded to this before. We did it in phases. We didn't
Hmm.
do it all at once. But there was a point in time where we had to pull off the Band-Aid, and this is how we're going to do it. But I really think starting with those power objectives was very, very helpful. It made sense of the learning. It really got them down and dirty into their curriculum. That was a lot of time and effort, a lot of work. A lot of our work with the FIT modules, it just made sense. We did test blueprinting, a lot of the stuff that's just really good teaching. Um, we had a lot of PLC work, a lot of PLC work, a lot of good conversations. we had we read, I know you said like of course there's research, but like there was our assistant superintendent did a board member talk with Alfie Cohen's homework myth.
Hmm.
Just like we were really trying to just get to the bottom of everything. Um, Keeping our community informed as much as we could. But we've gone through like three different administrators during this and it's stuck. So
Right, that's great. There were three fires in particular that you mentioned.
yeah, yeah.
So the
I
first, the fi
those are the ones that interested me. Yeah.
well, we've already talked about points and percentages and using that for accuracy. I did love how he put that piece when he talked about, well, can you tell me the difference between an 83 and an 84? Because that is, I was like, that makes so much sense. I love that.
Yes, and I think that's a great conversation to have with teachers, you know what I mean? And we started off with here's student A, here's student B. Who knows? I keep using chemistry. I don't know why, but who knows chemistry more? And it's really interesting, like it's a great conversation where percentages lead you.
Hmm.
We're a school district that still gives percentages, but I still feel like we're pretty accurate in our learning that we, give back to our community. Um, what I would like to get better at is to have clarity of what proficiency actually is beyond a 90%. And so
Hmm.
we're working on that. And I think some of our, teachers have got it right on. Some of us are still wrestling with that. So I think that's a really good one.
Hmm.
I also talked about the laziness,
Yes.
because I think we hear that. We talked about that one. And the other one, if I offer reassessment, my kids won't take the first test seriously. My kicker on that one is that the kids that didn't take the test seriously probably didn't take it before standards based either. Now there is some gaming of the system that can happen, but you're going to squelch that. You're going to put processes in place and structures in place where it's going to curb that. We're not going to have the
Hmm.
kids play us. All right, we're
Right.
we're too good for that. But you know, standards based didn't create misbehaviors of all misbehaviors of kids. It was
No.
there beforehand, but we don't want gaming of the system either. We
Right.
want this to work in the best way it can.
We'll say, and I use this one as an example. Those two combined, that the laziness piece and this retake is making them lazy. Truly lazy kids are not going to want to take a test twice. So, I mean,
Or stay after school,
or
or like I
say,
was
yeah,
talking about advocating life skills. If anything, let's teach them how to do that because that would
right,
be great. But
right. I've known some lazy kids, and if I said "Hey, you're going to have to stay after class, well, then I better get an A on this one. They'll do
yeah,
that because
yeah,
I'm not staying
exactly.
after school.
Wormley speaks really well to this, to a reassessment. And I want to say he is in the episode on the podcast about reassessment. So if that's something you're interested in, tune in. They're about
Yes,
an hour a piece or 50 minutes a piece.
and that's the podcast, The Fires and the Grading Show.
Correct. Correct.
That's up on the screen now. So if you're there are currently 15 episodes according to
16.
16
One just
now. So
dropped.
you said
Yeah,
that's
the
right. It just
proficiency
dropped.
skills just dropped, which
So
I'm going to be
there's
watching.
so find your favorite podcast provider and go to the Fires in Grading Show, and that's hosted by Garth Larson, Becky Pepler, and Don Smith, the
Yes.
authors of the book that we've been talking about. So we our time is up for the most part, Connie. It
Okay.
just flies by when you're
Hmm.
involved. What's next for you in your professional life? Because you are a wealth of information. I got to tell you.
Oh, thank you. I've been at this for a while. Whatever it's going to be coaching teachers. I love it. And I get a lot out of that. I have a lot of passion for education. This is my 34.66 years completing. Don't forget about the 0.66. So it will lead me somewhere. I don't know exactly where yet, but it will be something with coaching or, something with instruction or something like that.
Well, we're both at the age now where the teachers are kids of age that we may have had in class when we first started. So,
Oh, yes. Well,
yeah.
I'm an older mom, so I had students that have kids my age, so it's great. So, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's grandchildren out there that, are part of the equation now.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I really love catching up with you. Thank you for sharing your time.
Yes, thank you.
Um, is it okay to give out your email address? Because I'll
Yeah,
put that on the
that would be
screen. There it
fine.
is.
Yep.
There it is. So thank you for your time. If you have other
Yes,
questions
yes.
on standards-based grading, here's the email address. You can reach out for Connie, or you can contact me and we can have the three-way call here so we can all talk about standards-based grading. And again, check out Perry's website because they do have some really good work done on their curriculum, and it's something that I've fallen back on a few different times to give
Good,
examples of how things should be done. So great work there too, Connie.
good.
And for everybody tuning into Educational Norm, you know the closing, be kind, be professional, and find solutions. Thank you, Connie.